Welcome to In Studio with The Hollywood Reporter. I'm Carolyn Jardina, and we're here at the Kim Novak Theater on the Sony lot with Julian Slater, who was the sound designer, supervising sound editor, and re-recording mixer on Baby Driver. Congratulations.
Hi. Thank you so much.
And you've had a very good week, a BAFTA nomination and Cinema Audio Society nominations.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's to be recognized by your peers to any degree is, it's a career highlight, undoubtedly. Yeah.
And this is a little bit different than the last time you were recognized, which you told me was an ugly sweater contest.
Yes, that's the only thing I've been recognized for officially, which is 2 years ago, was at a Christmas party, yeah.
Uh-huh. And what was the sweater?
It was just ugly, just very ugly. Let's just leave it there.
Okay. You've worked on all of Edgar Wright's movies,
Yeah.
Even before Baby Driver. Your credits also include Mad Max Fury Road, and you just finished Jumanji recently.
Yeah.
So congratulations
Out in theaters now.
on those as well. So let's talk about Baby Driver. This is obviously a very unique movie. The way the music and the sound and the pictures are all choreographed and coordinated. Tell us a little bit about the process. It was obviously a very different process than many movies.
Yeah. I'd like to say that I approached it from day one with a strategic plan of exactly how to do it, but that's not true at all, and I'll be lying. Because it is so musical and everything is choreographed either visually or sonically to the music that's playing at that particular time, we kind of had to change how we work. So, I've been doing this for not a small amount of years now, and in the UK we work in time code, and over here in America we work in feet and frames, but for this we kind of had to work in bars and beats, because in musical notations. So, we had to tempo map every piece of music, find out its given tempo at any given time, and then we would pitch and time stretch and tempo map each sound that wasn't the music to match the music, so that everything worked and had a rhythm and felt musical. So, hopefully one listens to the soundtrack and hears the sound design working in conjunction with the music pretty much the whole time.
Okay. So how did you collaborate with the other departments?
Well, I feel that's a really good example of why the movie technically works so well, is because Edgar has his close collaborators who he's worked with for many years. So his picture editors I've worked with for many movies. I even know his production designer and his DOP, because we get to hang out together, and Stephen Price, the composer.
Right.
And
Bill Pope is the
Bill
DP,
Pope, yes, exactly. And Jonathan Amos and Paul Matchless are the editors. And so what that does, it breeds an environment of what I like to think of as true collaboration, where there's no fear of saying something that it could get rejected, or you're feeling that you're stepping outside your own area of expertise. I feel like it's, if you go on a first date, you portray an image of yourself, and you're being quite careful about what you're saying, because, you're not quite sure of the other person. And I feel that's the same kind of thing. If you have a long-term collaboration with a director, and also, say, the picture editors as well, it breeds this kind of creative pool of being able to exchange ideas. So, I could walk into John, for example, and suggest that not that it happened a lot, but I could easily go into John, because we're all on the same floor of the cutting room, and suggest, could you roll a cut by 3 frames to make it work with this? And he would, he'd certainly give it a go without, being offended by it, and try it. And if it works, it works. And if it didn't, it didn't. And likewise with Stephen Price, the composer. He's a good friend of mine, so every day I'd be on the phone to him and he'd be on the phone to me, and we'd swap ideas and bounce things back and forth. So, yeah, I feel that long-term collaborations like that breed creativity.
Mm-hmm. Now, as I understand it, it was all storyboarded. The music was all cleared before production began. So when did you come onto the project, and what were the early conversations that you and Edgar had to have? When did you start talking to the other departments?
Edgar has been speaking about it notionally to me for a good few years. And I know he's been working on it in the background of his other projects for a good 10 years. So when he spoke to me officially about it, I had a good idea of what it was, but it wasn't until I actually read the script, from the beginning to the end, that I realised quite what his vision was for the syncopation and the music to work together as one thing. And also from the story point of view, the kind of the sonic world being portrayed through Baby's perspective. That was something I hadn't quite grasped until I read the script, because that's kind of what we try and do. Like with the mix, we're trying to help tell the story and support the characters and the acting through the sound design and the mix. Not detract from it, but to help pull you through and take you on a journey.
That's why I'm out of here, baby. That's why I'm out of here, baby. Before these cops put me down in the ground, baby. I'm running rest till I'm out of this town, baby. You want your money back, chase me. I have to end this.
Let's elaborate on that, because that's a really important point, that it was told through his perspective, including the tinnitus. Talk a little bit about some of the things you did in order to really, have people see it through his eyes.
So, I guess you can break up the process of what we did into the sound editorial and the mix. And if you take the mix, for example, with regards to Baby's perspective, we dubbed it and mixed it in Dolby Atmos native. And we played the music much more in the surrounds than is probably traditional. Than is traditional. So every time Baby hears stuff he's listening to music on his earbuds, it engulfs you a lot more than perhaps a more traditional mix would do. If he takes one of his earbuds out to speak to someone, and he pulls his right earbud out, we then play the music on the left-hand side of the cinema, sometimes throughout the entire scene, which again is not a conventional thing, but it's because that's how Baby's hearing it.
Right.
His tinnitus, the story point of why Baby listens to music so much is because he suffers from tinnitus, which is the ringing in the ears caused by a car accident when he was younger.
Why does he listen to music all the time?
Story-wise, in the movie, if he's not listening to music, if music is not playing, if he's not listening to it on his earbuds and it's not playing within the environment, you hear tinnitus, as Baby does. Tinnitus, sorry, we say tinnitus in the UK. With regards to that, we developed a range of ways to convey tinnitus, because a high-pitched ringing in the ears, sometimes pretty loud, is quite an aggressive sound. And whilst that's okay for a 20-second, 30-second burst, we discovered that if you're going to be playing that over the course of a whole movie, it's going to alienate the audience and it's going to probably turn them off to what they're listening to. So, with this movie, tinnitus is a myriad of different frequencies. We use different devices. It's sometimes it's even held strings in Stephen Price's score. More often than not, it's in the same key as the music that he's just been listening to or the music that he's about to listen to. So quite often we use the tinnitus sound as a bridge between two pieces of music.
Right.
So, it's really about supporting what's happening on the screen, but doing it in a way that hopefully the audience, totally relate to and understand what Baby's going through. And
right.
Sorry, just to go back to the tinnitus, the more stressed the baby is, the louder the tinnitus is, like it can be in real life. So again,
right.
we're playing with different elements to support what's going on.
Right. It's so subtle what you do, but it makes a huge difference as a viewer.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty. Sometimes it's less subtle than others, but there's a lot of subtlety in there, deliberately so, because it happens throughout the movie. And what's been fun is, I've spoken to several people now who've watched the movie several times and are picking up on different things each time. So it's a multi-watch movie.
Mm-hmm. So the other thing that we should talk about from a story standpoint is the different car chases were different stories, if you will. The first one, everything went perfectly. Then we have the ones that go astray. So would you talk a little bit about your approach to the different chases?
Yeah. So there are several car chases in the movie. The first one, the movie starts straight off, like a bullet out of a gun with a car chase. And that car chase it's in many ways, it's the perfect car chase. Nothing goes wrong for Baby. Everything goes just sweet as it should do, and you understand how great he is as a car driver. So for that sequence, it's a very stylized sequence. We have, we design loads of different whooshes to go on the car pasts. All the engine revs are not only in time with the music, but they're pitched to work perfectly, hopefully, with the music. And all the police sirens are timed to work with the music. The next car chase, where things start to go wrong, an off-duty Marine starts shooting at them. So we made that a much more visceral kind of vibe and less stylized, and also the sounds are detuned a little bit compared to being perfectly tuned to the music. So yeah, each car chase, depending on what is happening, again, to play it from Baby's perspective and from that character, each car chase has been designed and mixed in a slightly different way to each other. Yeah.
Okay. And let's talk a little bit about the recording of the different sounds. So the driving, I know there were a lot of stunt drivers on the show. Did you go out and record them? Did you get behind the wheel?
Unfortunately not. I didn't get to drive the cars. We had a guy who went to Atlanta for us and spent 2 days recording on a closed racetrack, and we got all the cars back that we used in the shoot, all the main cars, and he had fun kind of driving around the circuit for 2 days endlessly. And then we get that all back to the cutting room, and a lot of them are in the movie, but quite often, you get something back. So for example, the first car chase is a red Subaru WRX. I know nothing about cars, but it has what's called a dump valve. So every time you change gear, it kind of goes. But if you're doing a movie that's all about syncopation to music, you can't have that sound happening the whole time because it breaks up the rhythm. Mm-hmm. So for the Subaru WRX, we use some of that original recordings, but most of it has been replaced with different kinds of cars. Each car is actually an amalgam in the movie. When you hear that car, it's an amalgam of, say, 5 or 6 different cars. Yeah. Okay.
What were some of the other more challenging sounds?
It was all challenging. And it sounds... It really was all challenging. To do things like, if you're going to keep a set of police sirens perfectly in sync with the music that's being played is one thing. If the music is a varied tempo, like the first track is the John Spencer Blues Explosion, the tempo is not a 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the tempo just does this. And the track is used in its entirety. So once you map a police siren to that sound, it may work musically, but it sounds ridiculous. At times it sounds ridiculous because it's going so fast, a police siren wouldn't sound like that. So we had to figure out ways in the mix to introduce the sounds when they work musically and work cinematically so that you believe it and you get that it's in sync and in tempo with the music. And then when it starts sounding ridiculous, you pull it out of the mix, bury it for a bit, and then when it's working again, you reintroduce it. So the mix is this kind of, it's like a 3D puzzle of different elements that are all within the mix at the right time that works both musically and cinematically. And when it doesn't, which is quite often, it's pulled out of the mix. So that's one thing. And I guess that the toughest thing that we went round a few times was there's a scene towards the end of the movie when Baby gets his ears blown out by Buddy and he goes deaf. If you're going to convey deafness, it means he cannot hear what's happening around him. But if you've got a lead character who's speaking to him, you need to hear what she's saying. So trying to convey a loss of hearing, but yet still hearing the words so the audience aren't struggling to understand what's being said, that was quite tough. We went through several iterations of that over a good few months to get that right.
Okay. Should we give a shout out to your production sound mixer and some of the other key members of your team?
I would love to give a shout out to various people. Mary Ellis was our production sound mixer. My crew who work with me tirelessly, Dan Morgan, my dialogue ADR supervisor, Jeremy Price, Martin Cantwell, Arthur Grayley, Rowan Watson, Buster. I'll stop there.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your career. So how did you get into the business? When did you become interested in sound?
I have always been interested in sound, whether it was doing cassette to cassette editing and listening to the Top 40 show in the UK and doing pause button editing. I always knew I wanted to get into sound. I just didn't really know what aspect of sound. I originally studied at a place called the School of Audio Engineering in the UK because I originally wanted to get into music and be a music engineer, and I kind of sidelined into the film side just after I went to that college. And so from around 1991 to about 2008, I ran my own post facility in the UK, pretty successful, and decided to leave and get out of that and become a freelancer in London, which I was for 5 years. And then 4.5 years ago, I took my family on this crazy journey and we moved here to Hollywood, and here I be.
Well, you mentioned initially you were interested in music. I would imagine that background served you well on this particular film.
Yeah, I think so. Undoubtedly, help from people around me who know more about that side than I do. People like Stephen Price, and I should have shouted out Bradley Farmer, who was the music editor. Who, we had an open Skype session pretty much all day, every day, so we could just talk about ideas, and he would take stuff and pitch it how he felt was working to the music, or so yeah, it's like any person who is good at what they do is surrounded by people who are equally as good as what they do in their own area. So I'm blessed to have a great team of people around me. And I should also say, of course, working for someone like Edgar, every movie that I do with him for me sounds pretty spot on, because he's a director who understands sound.
Right.
And so, let alone Baby Driver, but just every movie that he works with, of course. And I feel I can only be as good as the director that I'm working with. So, I follow his lead.
Mm-hmm. How did you and Edgar meet?
I don't actually know the germ of where it began. I know that we were interviewed for Shaun of the Dead, and in the UK, my facility and I and my facility worked on a lot of comedy stuff that was quite risque and was known for its sound. There's a guy called Chris Morris who does this kind of crazy stuff in the UK, and I think Edgar was a fan of that, and I think that's where the original kind of introduction came from. But I actually don't know. I just know that he's been lucky enough to continue using me ever since Shaun of the Dead. So
clearly a good team.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're ready to wrap up, but thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations on the nominations.
Thank you so much.
And thanks for watching.
Thanks.